February 1994. NASCAR showed up to Daytona for Speed Weeks with high hopes. The sport was riding a big wave. Big sponsors, big stars. The greatest race in America was just 9 days away. Then on February 11th, before a single qualifying lap had been completed, Neil Bonnett was dead. The garage went silent, drivers mourned, and then 3 days later, on Valentine's Day, the exact morning of Bonnett's funeral, it happened again. A kid from the mountains of North Carolina, a champion, a man who had never ran a single Winston Cup race. His name was Rodney Orr, and most people have never heard of him. Rodney Orr grew up in Robbinsville, North Carolina, a teeny mountain town so small his hometown fundraising headquarters was a wooden donation box built by the local Exxon station. Bobby Brooks Exxon, to be exact, the only Exxon in the county. His family ran a tractor and equipment business. Racing wasn't a career, it was a calling. Rodney had raced motorcycles for 15 years, even spending time as a Honda Supercross team driver before he found his way to stock cars. He entered NASCAR's Goody's Dash Series in 1991, a compact car series, 4-cylinder engines, 2,600 pounds, not exactly the big leagues. But Rodney was serious. In 1992, he won Rookie of the Year, and in 1993, he won the whole championship. He was 31 years old, married to Crystal. He was the father to an 8-year-old daughter, and he had one dream: run the Daytona 500. NASCAR was preparing to make the Dash Series engines obsolete, switching to V8s for 1995. So Rodney and his father, Beecher, made a calculated bet. They bought a used Ford Thunderbird from Roush Yates Racing with an engine built by Ernie Elliott and set their sights on the 1994 Winston Cup season. This wasn't about winning, Rodney said to himself in his own words just days before Speed Weeks. I am not going down there to win, I am going down there to get some time in. It will be a major achievement just to make the field. Even if I finish dead last, I will have achieved something. He got to Daytona, but he never got his lap. To understand what happened to Rodney Orr, you have to understand what happened 3 days before. Neil Bonnett was a legend. 18 Winston Cup victories, a member of the Alabama gang alongside Bobby Allison, best friends with Dale Earnhardt. He'd even appeared in the movie Days of Thunder. After a devastating brain injury at Darlington in 1990, one that robbed him of his memory, he spent years fighting his way back. Then, on February 11th, 1994, the very first day of Winston Cup practice, Bonnett was in turn 4 at Daytona. A shock mount broke, his Chevrolet snapped loose, dropped to the apron, and launched nearly head-on into the outside wall. He died at Halifax Medical Center at 1:17 p.m. from massive head injuries. He was 47 years old. His widow Susan had been driving down from Hueytown, Alabama, when it happened. NASCAR officials held the news for hours. They didn't want her to hear it over the radio while alone on the highway. The garage was devastated. Dale Earnhardt lost his closest friend. The Alabama gang had been gutted again. Just the year before, the sport had lost Alan Kowicki and Davey Allison in separate aviation accidents. Bonnett's funeral was scheduled for Monday, February 14th, Valentine's Day, in Hueytown, Alabama. That same morning, while the NASCAR world was burying Neil Bonnett, Rodney Orr was already dead. It was shortly after 9:50 a.m. on February 14th, 1994. Rodney was running alone on the track, a mock qualifying run, trying to dial in a setup for his very first Winston Cup qualifying attempt. In Turn 2, a remote section of the track, mostly out of sight from the garage and grandstands, his Ford Thunderbird started to go loose. The back end began to spin out, and based on skid marks and witness accounts, this is what investigators believe happened next. Rodney tried to correct the spin. The front end of his car caught the flat apron at the bottom of the banking. That contact jerked the car around violently and sent it launching back up the steep bank toward the outside wall. The car became airborne. It flipped and tumbled. The first part of the car to hit the wall at over 175 miles per hour was the windshield area, directly in front of the driver. The impact was so violent that a caution light was found to have pierced through the car's roof. NASCAR Winston Cup director Gary Nelson, a veteran of the sport who had seen almost everything, said it was the worst accident he had ever seen. Emergency personnel found Rodney without a pulse. He was transported to the Halifax Medical Center, the same hospital where Neil Bonnett had been taken 3 days earlier, and was pronounced dead at 10:06 a.m. due to massive head and chest injuries. He died on impact. There are no known videos or photographs of the crash. Rodney Orr died, largely unseen, in a corner of the racetrack that almost no one was watching. NASCAR's initial public explanation was simple: driver error, overcorrection. But the families weren't having it. Crystal Orr said plainly, "We know it wasn't anything Rodney did." David Bonnett echoed the same frustration about his father's crash. The Orlando Sentinel launched a 4-month investigation. What they found was a broken mounting stud. A part that holds the shock absorbers to the car had failed on Rodney's Ford, making the car completely uncontrollable. Their investigation found the same part had broken on Bonnett's car. The part cost just $3. Both Bonnett and Orr were also running on Hoosier tires, softer compounds that allowed faster speeds but raised questions about how they behaved under extreme stress. Hoosier was in a full tire war with Goodyear at the time, and 3 days after Orr's death, Hoosier released all teams from their contracts and pulled out of the race entirely. NASCAR officials never blamed the suspension parts or the tires. The investigation had quietly faded, but the families knew what they knew. The 1994 Daytona 500 went on. Before the race, veteran driver Rusty Wallace stood up at the pre-race drivers' meeting with CBS cameras rolling and gave a speech that NASCAR people still talk about. He called out over-aggression, reckless driving, ignoring damage during pit stops. He said, "I'm tired of losing my friends and my friends getting hurt. I hope you've got a lot of consideration for the other competitors instead of a lot of balls and no brains. We don't need that in this sport." He got a standing ovation from the garage. The race itself was won by Sterling Marlin, his first career Winston Cup victory in 279 starts. He held off Ernie Irvan by less than 0.2 of a second. It was a remarkable finish in an impossibly dark week. Dale Earnhardt finished 5th. After the race, he was asked why he was smiling despite not winning. He said, "Because it's Daytona and I'm alive." He was talking about Neil Bonnett. Rodney Orr was the 27th person to die at Daytona International Speedway in the track's 35-year history. He and Neil Bonnett together made Speed Weeks in 1994 the deadliest week in Winston Cup racing history. Their deaths, both tied to the same $3 part, eventually forced NASCAR to take suspension safety seriously. Spec shocks and springs are now mandated across Cup Series racing. Safer barriers line Daytona's outside walls. But Rodney Orr never got his qualifying lap. He never got his race, the wooden donation box at Bobby Brooks' Exxon in Robbinsville, the one with all of his plaques and pictures on the wall. That was his monument. His sister-in-law, Angie Buchanan, said it best. He lived for racing. He ate and drank it. That's all he needed. He knew the risks, and he was willing to take them. If you're going to do it right, and do it big. Rodney Orr did it right. He just never got to go big. If you like racing history like this, please subscribe.